Hello, everyone. Agent of Doubt here, and today I want to talk about cold reading. And if you don't know what it is, links in the description box for an explanation. But I'll summarize to say that it's a type of psychic who uses psychological techniques to leave their audience or their clients with a sense that they have psychic powers, they can see into the nether realm, they can talk to their dead loved ones, they can see things that they shouldn't be able to see, they know things that they shouldn't be able to know about their clients. And this can be done in a large audience or it can be done one on one. But it's basically a form of con artist that exploits basic human psychology in order to make money off people who don't know these tricks that they're using. And when you see it, when you see exposés on cold reading like Darren Brown might make or the Amazing Randy might have made, when you see Penn and Teller explain the things behind cold reading, you just get this sense that, holy shit, these are the lowest people in the world. Especially when they're conning people out of money by saying, hey, I'm talking to your dead loved ones. People like John Edwards, who had an entire TV show called Crossing Over that was based on his cold reading techniques. And when you get this sense of just how low human depravity can get when people are taking advantage of each other using these techniques, it can be very depressing. And I'm here to, in this video, cheer you up to let you know that there's actually a good version of cold reading out there. Ta-da! I do it for a living. It's a certain psychotherapy technique called motivational interviewing, and it's something that you learn, maybe after your Psych 101 class. You would learn motivational interviewing along with a whole bunch of other evidence-based therapies, and what MI is basically is just like cold reading. You go into a session and you don't have to know jack shit about the person that you're about to try to help. Okay? All of the information comes from the client, not from you. Okay? So these techniques that you're using to get them to talk and give you information to work with, they are very similar to the evils of cold reading when you're using motivational interviewing. Now, when you're using these techniques, it does give the person a sense like, holy crap, this guy is smart. And you don't even have to tell people with motivational interviewing anything to do. You don't have to give them a plan of action. You'll go over their plan, but you don't have to give any input or any advice to them at all. And yet they'll leave your session thinking that, oh man, I'm going to recommend this guy to all my friends and pass out his card because he's just so good at what he does. And you're basically telling people what they already know. And instead of using it to exploit them by telling them that you have a message from beyond because these spirit guides of their ancestry are trying to tell them something, what you are using MI to do is just lead them along a path to change because they're stuck in something. They came to you because they had a problem, and you're just trying to help them attack that problem from a different direction based on what they are already willing to buy into. And buy-in is a very important part of this. With cold reading, the buy-in is people are very attached to their loved ones. People really want to know that there's something beyond this mortal coil. They want to believe in psychic powers. That's their investment in this. When people put down some money for that psychic, they're basically rewarding that psychic for affirming their belief in magic. They're paying for that entertainment and saying, thank you for agreeing with me that reality is not all there is. Whereas motivational interviewing will tend to point someone back to reality. Okay? When people in motivational interviewing are listening, very often they'll use reflections, and that's just saying something that the person said back to them, sometimes in a slightly different way, to get them to realize how they sound. These reflections, they just they ground people. They bring them back to reality, because if somebody says something with a cognitive distortion, like an absolute, if they're talking in absolutes, like, this always happens to me. You would say something like, it always happens to you? Is it happening right now? Does it happen while you're in the bathroom? Does it happen while you're at your parents' house? Does it happen in the supermarket? And very often you'll find that no, it doesn't always happen. And of course, from the listener side, when you hear these absolutes, it's very easy to not believe them, but that the client does. That's why they used the word. So you latch on to any sort of absolutes or distortions of reality, and you just say it back to them. If someone says, "Oh, I saw this cold reader, and this guy was absolutely magic," you just look at them and say, "Oh, he's magic, huh?" And then they'll think about, well, was he magic? So there's a certain skill set in cold reading that also really parallels motivational interviewing, in that the basic skills in motivational interviewing, there's an acronym for it, and it's OARS. OARS. There's 4 things that you do in motivational interviewing that if you only did those 4 things, those 4 basic motivational interviewing things, you would succeed. If you could keep yourself to just doing those things, a 1-hour session with a client will leave them feeling very refreshed, and leave them with a sense that they got somewhere in that session. And the first of those 4 things, the O of the OARS, and OARS, I have another way of describing OARS. OARS is how to sound therapist-y. Okay? That's my description of OARS. But OARS is, it's a way to get back to reality. Okay? Like, take a client from their hysteria about something, their distortions about something, and bring them back to a grounded place where they can actually look at their problem and make a plan for change for themselves. So the O of OARS is open-ended questions. Kind of the opposite of a lawyer. A lawyer will only ask you a question if he thinks he knows the answer already, and he's trying to ask you yes or no questions, questions that there will be a very short, closed answer to. If you're asking open-ended questions, you don't know what the answer is going to be, and it could be anything. The open-ended questions are things like the classic, stereotypical, how does that make you feel? What are your feelings on that? Can you go into what was in your mind when you did that? So how would you describe what happens in your mind? There's also the A of oars, and that's affirmations. And that's, you pick out things that a person is doing that they might not see as strengths, and you just reinforce that it is a strength. So the O and the A are very important to cold reading as well, but they don't frame it that way. In cold reading, the open endedness is being vague, okay? And you're waiting for the audience or the client to latch on to something in that vagueness and give you something specific, right? And once that specific thing is gotten by the cold reader, they then elaborate further on that and makes the audience or the client feel like maybe they knew that when they said the vague term, and then when the cold reader is spitting back the as a reflection, they're spitting back the fact that was given to them from the client. It makes them seem more intelligent, more magical, more psychic. And the affirmations are different in cold reading in that if you were to have ever watched the John Edwards show, he would call them acknowledgments, which is it's also a term used in MI. Affirmations, acknowledging. If you just say, "Oh, I see that you're a painter," you're acknowledging someone's hobby, and it looks strengthening to the person. So when John Edwards said acknowledgments, he meant that people would go home and think about the things that he said, the vague things that he said, and then they'd find something in their life that actually fit that. And then they'd get back to him and say, "Hey, remember when you said that there would be somebody in their 40s that was looking out for me? I went home and I realized that my aunt calls me all the time." You know? And so that's how they're using acknowledgments in a reverse way. Now, the R of oars is reflections. I've already gone into that. And the S is summarizing. You bring people up to speed with everything that's already happened. Now, summarizing for a motivational interviewer lets the client know that you've been listening, and it helps you get another jumping off point to work on the next part of getting them to change whatever it was that is bothering them. For a cold reader, summarizing is a way to reframe some of the things that have happened in a way that makes the cold reader look more psychic, look more magical, and give the person a receipt for all of the things that he's claiming to be magical about, and saying, "Look, here's a list of things that we've gone over that I didn't know before you came here, or I shouldn't have, and I got, how did I get them?" And if somebody is motivated to think that that person is a psychic, they will just normally assume that that person knew beforehand or during the session got that information from a magical source that wasn't the client or the audience, because they don't want to believe that. They want to believe in the magic. So that's the difference between cold reading and MI, and that's the basic skills. But the next set of skills, a little bit more advanced, would be polarization, and you'll see it more often actually in cold reading right at the beginning, whereas in motivational interviewing, in a 1 hour session, you'd see it around the 30-minute mark. You'd see the interviewer, the therapist, trying to find a polarization. And what I mean by this is a cold reader will say things in the beginning of their session like, "I'm getting a sense that you're a very calm person, but sometimes you can be very angry." right? Now, those two things are polar opposites. You could be everything in between there, right? And these platitudes are meant to give you a sense that they know who you are when they actually said nothing. Very much like motivational interviewing, you're not giving them anything from what you already knew. You're going into this session knowing nothing about a person, and you're saying things that they already know. You're so with polarization on the MI side, what you're looking for is ambivalence. You're looking for that one place that they're really bothered with, and when you ask them about it, they say, "Meh, I really don't care whether I do this or that," right? And it is the motivational interviewer's job to point out that yes, they have pros and cons on both sides of this issue, right? And to tell them, look, it's not that you don't care. It's not that you couldn't care less what happens. It's that you care on both sides. And how do we resolve this? You know, and this polarization could be anything from their life that they've come to settle on. That would be the ideal thing. Is this person came to your session with a problem, and they'll say that this and this are their problem, but there's nothing they can do about it. you know and really, uh, they know within them what they can do about it. you know and it's your job to let them know that they know. It's And in that sense, somebody might see something cheap in motivational interviewing, in that the main premise of it is that people already know how to fix themselves. The answers are going to come from them. And maybe they don't know the best ways to fix themselves, but they have an idea of where to start. You know, Nobody comes into a session not knowing anything about their own situation. People are their own experts about themselves. You know, and if you're going to try to fix someone with a 1 hour session, not knowing anything about them, you have to evoke within them the answer. You know, they're the ones who are going to fix the problem because you only met them a couple minutes ago. You know, so all of the MI techniques are getting the expert of that life, the person who's living it, to recognize what they already know about how to fix their problems, and then move them from a place where they're not knowing or acknowledging the problem to a place where they're seeing, well, maybe I really want to change, to a place of, okay, now that I want to change, how do I plan for it? You move them along the stages of change from pre-contemplation to contemplation to planning to action to maintenance on that, right? That's the purpose of motivational interviewing. But, you know, somebody who's a little bit chintzy with their money and wants to be a do-it-yourself kind of person, they might look at what a psychotherapist does for a living and say, nobody needs a psychotherapist. They can just do this shit on their own. Read a self-help book. And there are many self-help books out there that could help you along these things, and you could just answer these questions about yourself, and yeah. But I would say that the need for psychotherapists in the world is borne out by the fact that people come to the office. They're there for a reason, and that reason is they got stuck. They tried to handle stuff on their own, and they needed a little push. They needed to have somebody's perspective inserted into this, and they needed to have someone to bounce things off of. And yeah, the world is full of people who don't have really good friends. They don't have a best friend that they can bounce their ideas off of, and that is sad. And that's what creates the need for therapy. The fact that people can't talk to their parents and get advice. They can't ask the community to help them solve a problem. They just get stuck and think, oh, this is where I'm just going to have to live my life, and I'm going to be miserable. And then they end up in a therapist's chair. Now, both techniques, motivational interviewing, cold reading, they give a person back what they already knew, right? One of them, however, is to the detriment of society and is exploiting people's love for their lost loved ones and exploiting people's need to believe that there's something more than reality because they're so miserable in reality that they need magic in their life, you know. And the other is simply trying to move people along from places that they're stuck in their life that bring them sadness and make them make changes in their life for the positive. So yeah, as a psychotherapist, I'm a Jedi cold reader. I am a white hat mind hacker, and I help people with these techniques rather than hurt them. And I hope that makes people feel a little bit better that these techniques are out there and that they can be used for good, and more often are used for good rather than evil.